thank you for being here. Some of you recall the glory days of summer lecture when...
Oh, sorry, I'm too close. I'll He's recording.
No, that's actually me.
Is it you or is that you?
That was you. Too much technology. Anyway, and Dirk kind of got to a point where it was more than he could do. And this summer we had some things going on that seemed lecture worthy, not the least of which is the wonderful work that Zoryan has been doing in the pollinator space. And some of you have probably heard him share in other places about this topic, but we just felt like it was really important for him to say these words in this space, because this is something that should really matter to the people who gather here, especially those people who gather here on Sunday morning. So Zoryan, without any further ado, thank you for being here.
Thank
and
you.
Share away.
Now,
And they'll all watch it online afterwards.
sorry, so we can see your face. Okay, am I on? Am I live? Great. Okay, thank you for coming. So I'm going to start. Hello, my name is Zoryan Ivakhiv-Gray, and I'm a part-time resident of Greensboro. In this presentation, I will speak about my work with the Pollinator-Friendly Greensboro project, pesticide activism, and pollinator gardening, and how all of this can create a thriving, resilient, and safe ecosystem and refuge for humans and our pollinator partners we rely on. First, a bit about myself. I grew up in Burlington, coming up to Greensboro in the summers, always fascinated by wild and domesticated plants, insects, and other animals. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've been doing pollinator gardening, pesticide activism, Greensboro pollinator networking, and more. In this presentation, I'll have 3 parts, each with about 10 slides each. Part 1 is focusing on the problem, but I'll also explain what exactly pollination is and how it works. Part 2 is about solutions, which I'll explain through my own experiences in activism and gardening. Part 3 is about the Pollinator-Friendly Greensboro project, our history, goals, projects, and how you can get involved. And I should mention also that the reason I have these 2 is because it's been hard for us to sync it in a way that works, so I will have to look back and forth. But I'll try to do both of them. Perfect. Okay, part 1. Okay, first, pollination. Anybody who's taken care of a garden or been to a plant nursery knows that seeds don't come out of the blue. Neither are flowers meant only for humans to look at. In fact, even those cultivated flowers once had one job, to fertilize and create seeds. Pollen from the male stamen that you can see up there, which are the ones on the outside on a flower, must make its way to the female, oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's what I'm forgetting. To the female stigma, where it falls into the ovary and fertilizes the ovules and begins the formulation of a seed. There's a twist, though. Almost all plants need the pollen to travel to a different plant for successful pollination. This is where pollinators come in. The University of Pennsylvania states that more than 78% of flowering plants in temperate regions rely on pollinators to fertilize their flowers. That's 78% of several thousand species. This includes all fruiting plants, some trees, the squash family, nut plants, wildflowers, and many vegetables. The few that don't rely on pollination, like corn or soybeans, are pollinated by wind. Who pollinates? Okay, so here you can see a bunch of different pollinators. All of these are species native to Vermont, and a lot of them are from local gardens. In fact, I think all of the bees are, and some of the butterflies are from mine, actually. But this did not happen overnight. In fact, it took millions of nights. The coevolution of milkweed and monarchs itself took over 1 million years. Some insects, like butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds, adapted to have extremely long proboscis, or in the case of hummingbirds, beaks, while others, like bumblebees, adapted to buzz at a frequency that disturbs pollen and have special hairs to pick them up and transport them. What they get back is nectar and pollen to eat right away, or in the case of bees, turn into specialized cuisine that includes honey, pollen balls, and royal jelly. Finally, who are the pollinators? There are over 350,000 species in the world of pollinators, and this includes a much larger variety of species than many people realize. Bees, moths, and butterflies and hummingbirds are just the beginning, as there are thousands of fly, wasp, bird, and bat species that also pollinate flowers. To an extent, anything that drinks nectar or smells flowers can pollinate, even humans, as my grandmother taught me. But unfortunately for our agricultural system and ecosystems, neither humans, chipmunks, or even flies are enough to pollinate crops. Plants that have co-evolved with specific specialist species, usually certain bees, butterflies, or moths, and need them to pollinate them, not just the more common honeybees or bumblebees, although having generalist species like that can be helpful. And don't forget that our honeybees are recently introduced from Europe, so they won't be able to save native wildflowers or certain crops. In fact, the most endangered of our bees are usually some of the 330 out of the 350 species of bees. These bees don't live in hives. They're smaller, solitary, and hardly stinging, like the hairy mason bee that I found in my garden at the bottom left of this slide. And there's way more of them than bumblebees, even though, as you can see, there's quite a few bumblebees, which are the rest of the bees. Why do we need wild plants to save pollinators? Many pollinators are also larval specialists, which means that their caterpillars only eat a certain plant, like monarchs with milkweed. That means that even if there are endless orchards of flowery, non-native cherries or apples, you won't have much diversity in pollinators unless you have some native plants, like shrubs or wildflowers. That's because these native plants have co-evolved with certain species, often the rarer ones. So the most common larval host plants in Vermont are various native shrubs, goldenrod, asters, and milkweed. But most native wildflowers have some butterfly or moth that relies on them for their survival. Over there on that side, I brought a bouquet of wildflowers, all from my wildflower gardens, and it includes goldenrod, a bunch of other wildflowers. So, pollination is one of several important tasks done by other animals that we humans rely on. Another one is pest predation. Of course, it is a human's perspective to think of them as pests, but the point is that it's a natural food web that we need. In nature, many species have larvae that can eat large amounts of plant leaves or stems, and birds can eat large amounts of fruit and seeds. But each of these animals have predators that have evolved to eat them, and thus help the plants stay alive. Ladybugs, lacewings, and certain songbirds have evolved to eat huge amounts of larvae to feed themselves or their young. That's up to 9,000 for one clutch of chickadee eggs. 9,000 little caterpillars. That means that that's 9,000 caterpillars out of your garden and instead for a chickadee. We need the host plants for these insects and wild habitat for these birds if we want to continue eating vegetables or fruits. Now let's talk about what the problem for pollinators or these pest predators is. There definitely is one, and it has been recognized by both scientists and local gardeners and naturalists. First of all, this isn't about saving some little bees that fly around in meadows that we have nothing to do with. The UN reports that 75% of crops rely on pollinators, and some, like pumpkins, apples, berries, and nuts, rely so much that they would either go extinct or extirpated or be almost unprofitable without constant hand pollination, which is a nightmare already unfolding in the Sichuan province. Thank you for reminding me. In the Sichuan province in China. So these farmers have to take a specialized brush, a pollination brush on every single flower in their whole orchard, or else they're not going to get any fruit. And studies are showing that it's not profitable enough for them to survive anyways, or for their agriculture to survive. So we don't want that to happen here. Unfortunately, Vermont is going down that route. Currently, half of our important pollinating bumblebee species are endangered, and many once common species like bats, certain butterflies, nighthawks, and bobolinks are all now disappearing from the Northeast Kingdom. The Vermont Center of Eco-Studies states that based on their research, the main reasons for this decline among all of those groups of animals is 3 things: use of pesticides, loss of native wildflower meadows and shrublands, and climate change. Losing our pollinators will result in a horrible crash in apple, berry, and squash crops, as we know, as I just showed you, and losing our bats and birds will create an increase in pests on our farms due to the absence of their predation. This is a dangerous problem that, alongside climate change, could make our communities suffer greatly within my own lifetime. We can't let that happen. Oh, wait, oh, whoops, sorry, I didn't change that? Weird. So yeah, these are the 3 reasons: pesticide use, habitat loss, and climate change. So, solutions. Instead of listing out the solutions, I'm going to describe my experiences with each of them. Remember the 3 main reasons about pollinator decline? Habitat loss, climate change, and pesticide use. Habitat loss can be turned around with pollinator gardening in corridors, which in turn can make them more resilient against climate change. Pesticide agriculture needs to be transitioned into chemical-free agriculture before it's too late. Okay, a little bit more about me for some background on something that we'll get back to. So during COVID and the years following, my family traveled from Burlington to Greensboro for the spring and summer, then back to Burlington for a year, and then to California and Berlin, Germany with my father, who teaches at UVM. Now we're transferring to British Columbia. In Europe, I became fascinated with the European rewilding movement, where people are creating refuges where the surviving animals in so-called backbred cows and horses, like the ones on the right, there, that I took all of those pictures, by the way, keep the land in a natural forest grassland scrub mosaic. So they're creating these refuges for them, these rewilding areas. And I'm going to come back to those. Now, during the summers, I was busy creating a wildlife garden at my grandmother, Nancy Hill's, yard on Baker Hill Road in Greensboro. We started about 3 years ago with a brush pile for chipmunks and fireflies to overwinter in, and planted milkweed, wildflower seeds, and wildflower starts from Lynette's Native Plant Nursery just down the road, and created no-mow areas that we let grow into a meadow. Which, by the way, both of these areas, some of those flowers were seeded, but especially in the one in the right, that all seeded by itself. So it takes time for the grass to be outcompeted by the wildflowers, but it does. So today, around half of her acre-yard yard is either a garden or some sort of wildflower meadow. The remaining lawn areas are mowed from June to early August every other week, so that they can grow long enough for the lawn flowers to bloom. Okay. I wanted to mention how this year I've been taking on my grandmother's vegetable garden. She's been teaching me and helping me with some things, and I'm also using permaculture and agroecology concepts, which is a scientific, basically it's about how you can do bio-inspired gardening, so based on how ecosystems work. That's also organic. For example, I've been doing a lot of interplanting, companion planting, and guilds, like that lettuce, arugula, parsley, carrot guild that's on the left, right there, and the salsa guild with the tomatoes, peppers, and basil in the middle of that, right to the left of the rhubarb. Other permaculture concepts I'm using is more perennials, so I've planted fennel, French sorrel, and oregano, and attracting beneficials. Beneficials in this case, which is again in a human-centered view because it's our garden, is pollinators and pest predators are the most important ones. So I already have birds and some pollinators coming in from the nearby gardens, but to keep the pollinators there, my grandmother suggested mixing in marigolds, nasturtiums, and sunflowers. And I created a certain bed with fennel and dill to attract pest predators like ladybugs. Thank you, Graham Nancy, by the way, because she's here. And guess who else showed up? This beautiful black swallowtail caterpillar munching on the fennel leaves that, thankfully, I don't use that much, which is on the bottom right there. And that's going to become a native black swallowtail butterfly. I think they're native, which is surprising because it's fennel, but goes to show that they can all come. So perfect. So right here, I'm going to show you an interactive map that I've been working on, just briefly so you can see some more photos of the place. So this is our property sort of in the area of those brown lines. Those are some trails. Where most of the markers are is the open area. That was once all lawn up to where that green line is around the outside about 3 years ago. Now we've decreased the lawn and replaced it with other more bird-friendly things or gardens for vegetables. And the current extent of lawn goes out to this yellow line, or kind of orange-yellow line, where my cursor is, right there. So in the corner, we have the corner meadow. Unfortunately, the photo isn't coming up there. I planted a shrub, a native shrub hedge, right next to that. Now we have a connection between that and the other corner wildflowers, which I do have a picture of. You can see it changes a lot in 1 year. This was it last year, and then this is from a different angle. A bunch of new plantings, some new no-mow, some signs. Then our lawn, this is our no-mow May lawn. It's sort of radical, but this is when we mowed it. So as you can see, the dandelions were starting to go to seed, but it wasn't a big problem in our garden, and no one else lives super close. And we got a ton of grass clippings for our garden, which was really great mulch.
Can we interrupt you with questions?
Maybe. So I was thinking I'd do questions a little bit later, but maybe at the next break between parts, I could do a few questions. So that people don't forget them, yeah. Then this is my mic, it's right here, yeah. So I showed you the vegetable garden. I'm creating another permaculture garden called a micro-forest guild, or a forest garden, from the crab apples that are there. Wait, where's the, what? The photo isn't there? Well, anyways. Yes, there's a crabapple. I'm planting perennials, mostly vegetables, and some plants, and that's also really great for wildlife. And yeah, and this is some other areas that I'm thinking of expanding. Oh, and then here's the brush pile. And hopefully I have the photos. So this is the brush pile and some other plants that we seeded. Brush piles are really great when there's less wood that's left to rot around, and animals, all the ones that forage in that wood or that live there in the winter, need a place to stay. So a lot of different animals live in there, especially the fireflies. I put up a game camera for about a week. This was the only good one that I got in that week, and it's kind of cute to see these squirrels going in now. But yeah, I know there's also fireflies, chipmunks, some birds will forage in there. So it's very successful. So now I have to get back to the slides. Okay, perfect. Whoops, yes. So what came out of this? Did I really make a difference in the local pollinator population or help any endangered animals? Well, yes, actually. Before, when it was almost all lawn, we would see maybe 10 fireflies in the area, similar to the hayfield across the road. Now, with the brush pile to overwinter in the meadows to blink and hide in, we see several dozen in the goldenrod meadow alone. We now see tiger swallowtails, butterflies in our windows, and have visits by hawks and foxes to check out our prey, right? They're predators. I counted 5 species of bumblebees. 4 of them are here that I took pictures of and identified in just one section of the meadow. Plus that solitary bee, the hairy mining bee, right up in the middle top that I saw this summer. And we now have 3 or 4 different species, or different warbler pairs, each from a different species. I think chestnut-sided, blue, wait, I forget them, but there's several different species. Then, although few of these current animals so far are endangered, although there's one bumblebee that is pretty rare, it is now becoming a safe haven for rarer animals, as long as they have a safe passage to our property, because it keeps increasing each year. Soon I started thinking about larger scale solutions, like pesticide activism and pollinator corridors. In early November 2023, I completed the simple certification by the National Wildlife Federation. We got a subscription to their magazine, plus a beautiful garden sign you can see there, and a suggestion: put out a press release into your local newspaper. Little did we know when we followed this suggestion that this would be the beginning of an exciting path of activism for me. Ta-da! I should have put the picture of me with the radio show, because that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, so, yeah? Yeah, okay, so then I wonder, maybe I'll go to the end of this part. Do you think people could wait another like 5 minutes? And just so that I'm not in the middle of the part. Okay, so Emily Langsner from Hardwick, a musician and pesticide activist, saw the article and interviewed me about it on her December radio show called The Pollinator Report, a radio show on Central Vermont Community Radio. Oh, and I forgot to say that I think Paul Fix helped us publish the article, right? Huh? Yeah. Anyways, the next month she asked me if I wanted to co-host the show and inform me of a bill in the state legislature, Bill H706, banning neonicotinoid pesticides. What are neonicotinoids? Along with glyphosate, a chemical used in herbicides like Roundup, neonicotinoids are one of the most powerful and dangerous agrochemicals used in the US today. They are stronger than DDT, possibly hundreds or thousands of times stronger, and are one of the leading causes of bee and bird decline, and likely cause honeybee colony collapse, yet are also used to coat 99% of corn seeds in many golf courses and orchards in Vermont. In Quebec, they have been banned for several years, and the corn crop has had no significant decreases of corn yields, yet this created an increase in pollinator and public safety. So far, Quebec and New York, this is as of this winter, were the only states to have this banned. With this knowledge, I began supporting Bill H706, which bans most uses of neonicotinoids, including coating seeds over the next 5 years, and that way gives farmers the time they need to safely adjust. I spoke at a press conference, interviewed legislators for our radio show. So I'll just play a little bit. I'm Zoryan Ivakhiv-Gray, and I'm 13 years old. I've been a guest speaker on the Pollinator Report radio show to speak about my certified wildlife habitat garden. Okay, so I'm gonna, I guess that's good. We don't have a lot of time right now. If I had more, I would show more. But yeah, it was a short speech, a 4-minute speech there, and in a pretty big press conference. So, yes, I'm doing it, Daddy. What?
Something is playing.
Oh, you know what?
You must
that
have
must be
gotten
the
another
first
going.
one.
Yeah. No, there's something in the background. Here, let me do it.
I don't know what happened. Oh, gosh. What is that? You know, I'll just turn the sound off.
Yeah.
Okay. In June,
I wish it were that easy to shut
here. In June, the bill finally passed. Unfortunately, it was a bit watered down, in ways like allowing golf courses to do whatever they want, but not farms. But it is a great start and will effectively create a low neonicotinoid corridor from Quebec through Vermont and New York State. By this time, we were both realizing that H706 was just the beginning. This is me and Emily. It might create a safer zone in 5 years, but it lacked the community building and more on-the-ground corridor concept, especially what I learned in Europe. We needed something more localized and engaging for community members. I knew just where to start. Okay, so now we can have questions.
I just had a very silly question about no mow.
Yeah.
We were looking at a yard full of dandelions about to drop seeds. And there used to be a guy who lived in Greensboro named Lewis Hill, who your grandma Nancy would pick up. And I wondered how Lewis Hill would feel about a lawn full of ripe dandelions.
It's a good question. I mean, that no mow went a little bit longer in terms of the seeding than we might do next year. But I think, I mean, this, honestly, in our garden, it wasn't much of a problem. And I mean, in terms of pollinators, dandelions aren't native, but they're probably the oldest, the longest non-native, which means that the generalist bumblebees use them. So I think that, I think at least in terms ecologically, it was great because it gave them a place to start, and then they all of the insect life moved on to the no-mow areas. But I don't know. What do you think, Nancy? Lewis would say?
Well, I think Lewis probably hadn't heard all of this research that you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Good answer. Good answer. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, if he was here, we would see.
So you've read two of his books.
Well, I have read, yeah, some of it. Yeah, Patty?
So when you did the no-mow, did you plant those wildflowers?
No, that was
And
just.
they naturally came up?
So the thing about no mow May, some people have criticized it. Just like the main reason that I've heard them criticize it is because they say that it could be an excuse for people not to actually plant native wildflowers. See, the thing is, when you mow a lawn a lot, right, you're keeping the grass really short, naturally short, and there's a lot of flowers that could be non-native. Some of them, like the wild strawberries, are completely native and they're great. That you're not letting them bloom, and it's also a really big space for a lot of bird life and pollinators to get around in some cases, even with our lawn. So in general, it's a lot better to let them grow, no matter what they are, right? Because at least for May, when they naturally are growing a lot faster and would outcompete natural herbivores, because then any of the insect life, like bugs, right, like beetles will use that, no matter whether they're native or not. So it's true, we did not plant that, and we've planted a lot of other areas, but we're not going to be able to plant that whole swath without rototilling it, which would be really, we're not able to in that spot, and it would also disturb the soil life. So in that case, before, we'll be decreasing the lawn, but it's better than having it mowed that whole time. And for people to get started, once you have no mow May, you can choose, okay, this area I'll let grow for the rest of the year, and native wildflowers will self-seed, right? Almost all of those flowers are from what used to be lawn, but they came on their own. Some of them I planted, but a lot of them came on their own. So what I'm saying is that it's a lot better than mowing it, and it gives you options to continue it.
There's still part 3, but there's a couple
Yeah.
more questions.
Questions? Yeah.
A lot of trends, like interior design trends, change, and right now the landscaping trend, conventionally speaking, seems to be very golf course-like, excessively mowed, and that seems to be the gold standard. I know that the real estate industry is pushing that a lot now. We know it's not healthy, but that's just how we're conditioned from all the commercials and things that we see. How do you think you could encourage people who think they're being a good neighbor or doing the right thing by doing that every week? How do you think you could convince them to let things get a little scruffier or pull them?
Well, yeah, that'll be coming in part 3. I was talking about that with a friend recently, actually, and I think part of it is that you have to appeal to the existing values to a certain extent. Like if people want to see something that's colorful, then think about planting very colorful native wildflowers, which are also really beneficial for pollinators. I think so. Yeah. So planting things that they're already somewhat familiar with. And another thing is I find that certification, like just basically signs, especially garden signs, especially from an official organization, that make it clear that what you're doing is really deliberate and that other people are doing it too, can make a difference. Like we have a lot of bikers going down our road, I think because of Hill Farmstead, or I don't know why, but often wherever they're from, they'll say, oh look, what is that? Is that pollinator gardening? And I hear them doing this while I'm in the garden, and then they start up a conversation. So I think if people see signs, also local neighbors, then they'll realize like, oh, other people are doing this. Because the trend is changing. You know, if I might be able to find it in here, but there's a really huge number of habitats that have been certified with the Wildlife Federation. Like, I think it got to the thousands, several thousand, which means that the movement is growing. So I think we're on the way, but just make it clear that it's deliberate, have some things that people are used to, like flowers, and yeah, I think signs make a difference. Yeah?
Do you want to just mention about the neighborhood in Barry and what that was like in the spring?
Yeah, so I was pretty impressed that this neighborhood that felt very suburban for a lot of the year, in May, somebody clearly got a trend going. And I would say like 40 or 50% of the lawns weren't mowed until like late May. And they were beautiful. They didn't go to seed like ours did at the end. And they were full of a lot of different flowers. It's incredible which flowers are hiding in that, in that lawn that you just don't see because the grass is competing them when you mow it. So yeah, that was pretty impressive to me that somebody must have encouraged that, but maybe it was just that people saw the other lawns. People had some signs that they bought. Yeah. So I think that's another good example. Yeah, Nancy?
But I think obviously more education is needed.
Yes, education.
There was a place outside of Albany, New York, where a lawsuit was brought because a lady's lawn looked messy.
It's crazy. Did you hear what happened about that lawsuit? Did it?
I believe he was not sued, but they told her to keep it neater.
Wow. Yeah. It's a change in minds.
Barry and landscapers may need to be brought in too, right?
Yeah,
They've been
definitely.
making their living getting rid of weeds. So sometimes it's hard to rein them in.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that,
Yep.
we come from Toronto, and we live in an area where the closer to downtown, the front lawns are very small. They used to be all grass lawns, but the trend is changing. People are planting flowers instead of the grass. They don't have grass anymore, just flowers in the front, which is a nice change.
Yeah.
It's easy to maintain, absolutely. Perennials, you just
I have a friend who lives on a very short street in Hardwick, and everybody's turned their front lawn into vegetable gardens. Right?
Wow. Yeah, that's another great thing. I think vegetable gardens are definitely ecologically, they're better than lawn. And another way to think about it that one of the permaculture books that I have says is that if you're doing more food-based gardening, so still some pollinator gardens, but things like vegetable gardens, what you're doing is you're saving an area. I mean, it's going to be a very small area, but the more people that have gardens, the less large monoculture, like if you grow corn, the less neonicotinoid corn. So that does make a difference. I think integrating some areas for pollinators is great, like what we're doing, but yeah, but gardens are a whole lot better than lawn too. And it's interesting to notice how much you use lawn. Like now that we have less lawn, we're noticing it more, really, I would say. Like I've been camping out there sometimes, and I've been noticing like what we need if we want to view and what we really don't use at all, which is a surprising part of it. Okay, so inspired by my wildlife garden, the pesticide bill and the farmland oh, it didn't move?
No.
Oh gosh.
Stuck. Hang on.
I did it. That's weird that didn't. Yes,
that
yes,
what you
it's
want?
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Inspired by my wildlife garden, the pesticide bill, and the farmland-compliant corridors of rewilding areas I saw planned in England, I set off in late February to form the Greensboro, or to help form the Greensboro Community Pollinator Working Group, recently renamed Pollinator-Friendly Greensboro. I knew of some fellow wildlife or pollinator gardeners, such as Lynette Courtney with her native plant nursery, so I emailed them about my idea. Our first meeting was the 3rd of March, shortly before town meeting day, and quite a few people attended. Oops. What happened? Oh, I miscopied this. Well, anyways, no, it's just when I was putting my doc into speaker notes, I made a mistake. So, inspired by, so basically, right at the same time that we did this, Jane Hoffman from the Conservation Commission was designing this declaration that had already been set out in Cabot. And before the town meeting, it was put on the agenda, should Greensboro adopt this declaration, which is what it says here, which is basically saying, whereas pollinators are important for our crops, be it resolved that the town meeting of the town of Greensboro, Vermont is declared a pollinator-friendly community, and that the town urges, so it's completely, it doesn't change anything in terms of laws, but it's just encouraging people to avoid use of insecticides, encouraging more pollinator-supporting forage, less mowing frequency, native species, so on. And that passed unanimously, which was really great. I supported it in town meeting, and I also got to promote our group at the same time. So that went really well, and it was a great start for our group to sort of say, hey, look, we passed this, let's make this a reality. So, along with events and special garden projects, here I can, our main initiatives are to encourage more people to have pollinator gardens and actually connect them up to create corridors. We are developing, Daddy, I know, I've got a plan. We are developing a vision for what a truly pollinator-safe town landscape would be. With this, I've been inspired by what I saw going on in England. There, the people doing the rewilding areas, which is in the red, the core rewilding areas, realized that even their huge areas, which are the only places where some species are not declining, aren't enough to actually save the species. So they've been trying to expand the landscape while still having humans have an important part there by creating corridors between the core parks and rewilding areas through rewilded margins, large hedgerows, and pollinator gardens. They're also encouraging farmers to transition from conventional farming that the market has sort of forced them into over time into more sustainable alternatives like regenerative agriculture or biointensive ecoculture microfarms, something that I recently learned about. And that's important because even if you have a lot of corridors, whatever they're spraying in those places, however the soil life is doing there, that's going to come into the corridors too. So that's why we need those places too. So that's one of several things that we've been developing our vision off of. Our vision is to have several core areas like Bar Hill or Willie Beach Park, large conserved areas of diverse wild habitats, especially meadows, scrubland, or wetland, the places that most pollinators or endangered animals live. So we need a few of those throughout the town, right? So that those will always be a safe space, sort of like the rewilding areas. And I think that we should also try an experimental rewilding area in a similar theory. But anyways, so yeah, we need core areas. They should be linked up with corridors of either meadows and stream buffers in the rural parts or pollinator gardens around our towns. In between these corridors, we'll encourage farmers not to use pesticides and to try more long-term and climate-friendly practices like regenerative agriculture. With all the horrors climate change will bring, I firmly believe that this kind of landscape is the only kind that will safely lead us through the future. So I'm going to show you this interactive map. It's not a vision map, it's more of a working map. Basically, the purple areas are the cores. A couple of them I'm just guessing, like these ones, but most of them are places that I've been to and that I know a little bit about how they're managed. And I'm sure there's more cores. This is a non-scientific working map. I'd love to have a biologist, if anyone knows, who could help us with this. So the cores we want to link up with corridors, right? The green and yellow are all existing pollinator gardens or wildlife habitats of some sort. The blue are all opportunities that we could encourage or work on. The pinkish color, like in Greensboro Bend, are opportunities that we've taken, which I'll get to. And then the red, there's a few possibilities that are just places where we think they might use pesticides, so that we'll just do surveys, and we'll get to this to encourage people to use less of them. With the neonic bill, some of these will need to anyways. But yeah, this is our start. And we want to connect these up with corridors and make it a safe landscape. So, oh wait, here. So, how can we make this vision come to a reality? The Pollinator Declaration was a start, but it's our group's mission to do more. Over time, we found several projects that might be just what we're looking for and that you all can participate in. So, there's 3 main projects. First is pollinator pathways. This is an incredible concept that is implemented across the country. It was formed in Connecticut, where local pollinator working groups had worked together with biologists to identify the existing cores and best possible corridors. So like what we're doing, but more scientific. I'd love to do that. And then focus efforts on creating pollinator gardens in those corridors, sort of like what we're doing. These areas are filled in by creating a couple of example pollinator gardens. So they get a group of gardeners to do, which I'll get to, but we're starting to do that in one place. And then doing events, sending info flyers, and more to get residents to create gardens in these corridors to connect the cores up. It has been replicated across the US and Canada, and even in Vermont, with groups like the Pollinator Pathway of Lamoille County, which has been helping our group get going. Today, there's a national organization, Pollinator Pathway, that helps smaller groups start and has an international interactive map that you can get on with easy certification. So this is the map. I'll just show it briefly. Oh, it might take too long. Okay, that's fine. We'll see if it comes up. Whoops. Okay, so as you can see, there is a lot of gardens in this map. If I was to zoom in, and I'm talking about the big map with all of those butterflies, which represents a garden, you'd see that there's the most in Connecticut where they got started, and then less based on how recently they've created pollinator pathway groups there. There are some in this area, but we're hoping that we'll encourage there to be more with our project. And you just do a simple certification on their website to join the map or get one of their signs. Our group decided that, like many pollinator pathway groups, we'll get a group of gardeners together for a couple of example garden projects. Our first project is, of the like is at the new Bend Rail Trail parking, where Lynette Courtney and other volunteers will be planting wildflowers and native shrubs next year. And I'll be helping while I'm here. In a few minutes, I'll talk about how you can volunteer too. First, the other projects. So, the other one is community wildlife habitat. One challenge with the pollinator pathway model is to get enough people interested and engaged. Because of the Greensboro Pollinator Declaration, we're considering trying out a second complementary model called community wildlife habitat for this purpose. Remember how I certified my garden with the National Wildlife Federation? Oh, here's the number, everyone. There are 300,000 habitats certified across the US with the National Wildlife Federation. They're mostly all gardens, right? Ranging from tiny window boxes in backyards to several acres of carefully managed meadowlands and gardens. These include at least 5 in Greensboro, 5 gardens, including our own. National Wildlife Federation helps pollinator working groups convince more people to join by creating a community wildlife habitat program. To participate, a group counts the number of habitats and events they have, and once they reach a population-sized goal, National Wildlife Federation officially recognizes the town as a wildlife-friendly community, as these pictures show here of towns being recognized. We thought it would be fun to have something that proves that we really are a pollinator-friendly community, but the real magic happens in the process. Just imagine how excited people would get if every few weeks a new number of gardens is announced and compared to the goal with certification as a reward. A couple, this is our thinking, this is what they say works, so, sorry, I have to put this back. A couple of weeks ago, the Greensboro Conservation Commission okayed the project, so we're working to get started right now. We realized that the last 2 projects focus a lot more on the corridor side of the vision than the farmlands in between. Although Bill H-706 passed, it will be 5 years till it takes effect, and there are still permitted and uses in alternative pesticides. So we got thinking about a way that we can make sure the entire landscape is pollinator safe. Unfortunately, I don't have a slide for this one. I missed this section, but you can imagine what it'll be like. So this third project is Farmer Contact. Our current plan is that in the fall, after gardening and event projects are done, we will reach out to the main grain farms or areas that we think pesticides are used, like golf courses, to start a discussion about alternatives. We might start with a survey and then present information. We know that the country club is heavy on pesticides, and golf courses happen to be one of the few exceptions in Bill H-706. We will also reach out to the farms in our watershed that grow corn or grain crops, because 99% of that corn uses neonics, so they'll be transitioning. One thing that happened since I wrote this recently is that somebody with one of the different pollinator activism organizations, they have a program where young people can ride door to door and tell people about these different programs and also ask for a donation for the group. I think that's Vermont, I forget which one, Vermont Pollinator Working Group, maybe? And this person who came up told me that there was this program with their group that they're working with experts to actually contact farmers directly to help them with the transition with Bill H-706. So I'm hoping that this fall we'll be able to get involved or basically get in contact with those experts so that when we're giving this information to the farmers, then maybe we can point them to that program. So.
We're just going to point them all to you, Zoryan.
Well, I'm still learning about farming transition. Okay, so we remind them that they will eventually have to transition away from neonics, and we can also use existing farms like Wilson Farm or Broad Fork Farmstead as examples for alternative practices. So these are our projects, but what is our action plan? We plan to focus on events and garden tours this summer, although it turns out we're not doing a garden tour, gardening projects this fall and next year, and farmer contact in fall and winter. If you're interested in joining any of our meetings or getting on our email list, please talk to me at my table or email greensboropollinators@gmail.com, which is our email. The next big event coming up is the Land That I Love mini conference in Peachum. This conference, which I've been helping organize, is about how anyone can make a difference with the climate and biodiversity crisis in their own gardens and farms. Speakers include Carol Fairbanks from Broad Fork Farmstead in Greensboro about regenerative farming, Ellen Blackley about soil and climate, and a variety of others. I'll be doing a short 15-minute finding about how we can mimic keystone animals in natural processes for more successful wildlife gardening, something that I got from the European rewilding movement. Yeah, and then if you want to, I put up the link here for registration and the information, but I also have that on my table. Well, I don't know if people can see. Yeah, they can probably see this online. So you can maybe take a screenshot if you're listening to follow that link. Okay, finally, we're here. The most exciting part, what you can do. If you're just getting started, there are several ways to go. I think doing no mow May and just mowing less often is a good way to start because you can choose to leave certain areas as a no mow zone after no mow May, as I mentioned. But for real diversity, you should make sure that you have food, like wildflowers or fruiting shrubs, water, maybe bird bath or pond, shelter, shrubs, etc., brush piles, and places to raise young, like shelter, maybe a nesting box. My top recommendation for these resources is the National Wildlife Federation, their website, which is right here, and I wrote out the long version, but just www.nwf.org/garden. That website is a treasure trove, and their book, Attracting Birds, Butterflies, and Other Backyard Wildlife, that I have at my table by David Mizejewski, I think, is my favorite. I think that's one of the best ones. If you have an existing pollinator or bird habitat garden in Greensboro, Hardwick, or a neighboring town, I strongly encourage you to contact us to let us know. We have that interactive map that I showed you that we'll put you on if you'd like, so we can use that in our planning of the corridors, and we can offer information about other ways of getting involved. Your next step is to certify the garden so that you can get on the map, put up a garden sign for others to see. The options that I know of, there's several others though, are National Wildlife Federation's Garden for Wildlife program, which has beautiful signs, which is the one right there, gives you a magazine subscription, and if we do community wildlife habitat, you'll count. Pollinator Pathways certification is even quicker, and you get to go on their map that I showed you. Their sign is also less expensive if you choose the garden signs. But when you certify, you don't need the signs. And the other thing is that if we do certified wildlife habitat, they'll be counting all of the certified National Wildlife Federation gardens. So if you're in the town, then that will help. And we will be doing the wildlife habitat too. So great. Then, once you have a successful garden, you might start thinking about how to extend your impact even further. Oh yeah, thank you. Like I did when I got into activism. Bill H-706 passed, but it left many exemptions, like golf courses, and there are still other parts of the problem, like pollution and climate change. So there's still work to be done. If you're interested in doing pesticide activism, the group I've been working with is called The Swarm, and is centered around northeastern Vermont. You could contact Emily Langsner, who's one of the leaders there, at livehive802@gmail.com if you want to join that group. And there are plenty of other groups throughout the state. I don't have time to list them, but yeah, you can do some research. Another thing that people can help with is garden volunteering. As I mentioned earlier, there will be 2 pollinator gardens around the Bend Rail Trail parking, as long as we have the volunteers we need to plant them. If you're interested in planting, you can contact greensboropollinators@gmail.com, and I'll put you on the list of people who are going to be volunteering next spring. You can use the same email for questions, to get on our email list, and to join our interactive map. Okay, resources. As I mentioned earlier, National Wildlife Federation's website is really helpful. You can find their certification page from there. Pollinator Pathways website is also very helpful. In terms of books, my top practical recommendation would be David Mizejewski's, oh yeah, I mentioned that, attracting birds, butterflies, and other backyard wildlife. If you're interested in integrating your pollinator gardens with orchards or vegetable gardens, as I did, and as somebody mentioned, a lot of lawns are doing in Hardwick, then you could check out permaculture. Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemingway is a great place to start, although there's several others I can recommend if you come to the table. Unfortunately, I forgot to add Doug Tallamy's books to the list on this slide. Tallamy is probably the most famous ecologist who has studied the science and theory behind pollinator gardening at this point, and he has written several books that put it all in simple and inspirational terms, which is why he's so popular right now and very well known. His books, Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Hope, are both beautiful and really intriguing. You can see more books about this at our table. I have several books. One of the books I have that people could check out is the model from Europe, where they're doing that rewilding, on how to do pollinator gardens with a rewilding model, which is really interesting. And actually, that's what I'll be talking about at the event in Peacham. Okay, we just finished. So questions. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Now it's almost 8. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you so much for coming. We have a few more minutes for questions, and I think if people are thinking of heading out, they can check out the table right now. I'll stay here for questions, and then at a certain point, if you miss that point, then you can just come to the table. But yeah, so.
So this may not directly be a pollinator question, but I've been excited this year while I'm driving around that more bugs are splatting on my windshield. They've splatted in the last 2 years.
Really?
And I wondered, didn't a few years ago, didn't we get neonicotinoid pesticides out of hardware store shelves?
That's true, yes. That was a much smaller. That's possible. Wait, so are you saying? Yeah?
Bugs used to splat on your windshield all
Yep.
the time.
That's definitely one of those effects.
7 years they haven't, but they're back.
Yeah.
Not quite as, anyways, it's an
That's
observation.
really interesting. Where have you noticed that? Especially. Wow, that's really good news because you want more bugs. I was just going to mention that this is another concept that's been used a lot in Europe, but there's something that scientists called shifting baseline syndrome, which was discovered by scientists in the Northwest, actually, originally, that even professional scientists tend to think of the baseline of what things should be, like even a recent baseline, like what nature should be like in recent years from their youth, right? So that's been expanded to a really interesting topic, which is basically how over time basically populations think that different places should be, in this case, like more open, more farm fields, and then back before they might have, how many years ago? Yeah, no, I'm not sure, but when ever wanting more forest here, because they were cutting it, but there's a lot of different examples of this. So yeah, that's another one that thinking like we need more insects on our windshields, which in this case is very true, because that's one of the cases where it's not causing a incorrect answer. But in some cases, people are thinking, like there's one, basically people often want more open lands, and there are certain, around here, right, and there are certain species like bobolinks that are endangered right now, but they came here because of grasslands. So it's debatable, that humans created. So it's debatable whether should we be trying to save them right now, or is their habitat out west good enough, because that's where they're technically native to. I have opinions on that, but anyways, yeah, that's an example. So questions?
So
Yep.
if you want to be on the pollinator pathway list, what is kind of like the basic minimum of to be able to say I have a pollinator garden?
Well, that's a good question. to be on our list, or, I mean, to be on our list, I think that you should have, I mean, I think the National Wildlife Federation, what they want, which is food, water, cover, places to raise young, and sustainable practices, I forgot that one, like no pesticides, is a good example. But I think for basics, as long as you have a water source, a flower patch, some good cover besides just flowers, so either shrubs, a brush pile, something like that, and in some cases, like Talamy actually that I mentioned has another program like this, it depends on how much of your lawn has decreased. So that's another way to put it. But I think for us, to be on our map, just to have something that would be a real pit stop on a pollinator pathway. So large enough space of wildflowers. So, and that could even just be like one of these benches to start, and then keep expanding it. Yep.
The farmers I talk to that grow corn say they understand that neonics probably aren't necessary, but they use it as kind of an insurance policy. And I've wondered why hasn't the government simply created an insurance program to encourage them to get off neonics more quickly?
Well, that's a really great question. I think, I mean, right now that they've had that big ban and people will have to, there are some programs for that, I believe, in that point, including especially that, I forget, I think the Vermont Pollinator Working Group has that program, and I think there are from the government. But before, when there weren't any bans, there was really no reason that the government would do that if they don't have any laws preventing it. So, I mean, that's what I understand about it. But yeah, I think in the next 5 years, there's several different ways that people can do that, including that one I mentioned. But.
There's some parts of the bill that they had to go through the Ways and Means Committee to make sure it was funded to support the farmers.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Type
I
of
remember that.
insurance way,
Yeah.
so that they wouldn't lose
Yeah.
in the process.
Yeah, and I know there was some the bill was almost moved to 10 years and then possibly even further because some farmers felt like that would be enough to transition. But in the end, it was moved back to 5 years. And I feel like, first of all, there are alternative pesticides that will be used, which isn't the best, but apparently some studies show that they're better than neonics. So I think that should hopefully give them time. And yeah, and with some of this new funding to help this process, it should work. So yeah, there's also a lot of exemptions. Farmers can ask for exemptions, especially in orchards, I believe. And another thing that was watered down was that now you don't need a biologist to get an exemption, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but yeah. So I'm hoping that there will be funding. And you can look in the wording, actually, on the legislature's website to see what there is exactly, because I can't confirm that. Any other questions? And people can check out the table right there, which has information about the Peachum event, books, so on. Thank you so much for coming. Happy gardening, everyone. Thank you very much, Ed, for inviting me.
Thank you.